Well, it just occurred to me that I could set up a frequency harmonic between the deflector and the shield grid using the warp field generator as a power flow anti-attenuator, and that, of course, naturally created an amplification of the inherent energy output.
See that?
Hey, middle-aged guy here. So you just saw an example of technobabble. So that's a 80s, early 90s thing from Star Trek The Next Generation. Like a lot of people my age, I'm stuck in the 80s and 90s. So, yeah, so that's why for our first example, I thought we'd build a generator of that wonderful language we saw there. So we're going to build a technobabble generator. So it'll be a good example of a simple JavaScript application we can do together. So the done version looks like this. All right, so here we go in the web browser. We've got some text in a paragraph. This is in a paragraph, dorsal input cloud, and then we click the button, we're going to get more text. So every time we click, acute dissipation pod, optimal dampening coil, so more technobabble. We're also making it mobile friendly. So over here in the iPhone simulator here, I can see it works pretty good, and it shouldn't have zoomed, but we'll fix that. Same thing over here in this particular one, so it's mobile friendly, so the buttons are bigger. The text is bigger, so it scales nicely for the mobile device. All right, so let's take a look at our overview here, our notes. So for here we're starting off, what is the technobabble application? I've got screenshots. By the way, the link to this web page that has the start code and all this is in the video description. So let's just jump down to the start code. So the start code is here. You can see there's some HTML. There's some, there's the paragraph and the button. So the HTML determines the structure of the page. We're going to have some CSS going in the style tag for the presentation, and then we're going to write code, JavaScript code for the behavior, basically saying, hey, when you click a button, you're going to get random words out of these 3 arrays, and they're going to get strung together, and they're going to get displayed on the page. So the JavaScript is going to handle that. So, so go ahead and grab the start code here and save it as technobabble-start and open it up in a web browser. All right. So we will, let's see. When you do that, open up the console, make sure that the code is running. So yeah, let's take a quick look at the code. Here we've got our 3 arrays we've declared. We've got a console.log, and it's supposed to be logging out the first word in the words1 array. So let's make sure that is happening. And well, I've already got this open. So here's the start code, technobabble start. So if I right click and inspect, check the console, there's the first word, there's acute. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in and write some code. So back to the notes, if I scroll down to demo, all right, this is walking through the steps. I've kind of put in 6 steps, 6 things we're going to need to do for this application. So what you should do is just go ahead and try to build this on your own first. So stop the video, write the code, see if you can get it working. I gave some suggestions on how to handle these different things. So go ahead and try it out, and whether or not you were successful, come back and watch the video to see how we did it together. All right, so if you haven't already, stop the video, go ahead. All right, welcome back. So let's go ahead and write some code. So I'm going to head over to here. And what I want to do is I want to pull a random number out of these 3 arrays. So let's actually go to the console and play with this. So words1, right? So we already know words1 is acute. So if and the console is really nice. So in the JavaScript console, I can go ahead and execute expressions right here. So I'll just type in words1, that gives me the array, the contents of the array. So you can see there's 42 elements. So words1 sub1 is going to be the second word, aft. Okay, so what I want to do is I basically want to get a random integer between 0 and 41 in order to pull a random element out of the array. So how do I do that? Well, let's just play around with a few things right here on the console. So math.random is a nice function, and that's going to give you a number between 0 and 1, including 0, but not going up to 1. So all the way up to 0.99999, whatever, is the random number I'm going to get back. So how do I turn that into an integer? Well, there's a couple steps to do this. So so if I want to get a number between, say, 0 and 9, what I would do is math.floor. All right, so math.floor is going to take a number and truncate it, round it down, basically. So I'm going to say math.floor, math.random times 10. All right, so that's going to give me a number between 0 and 9.99999. All right, and did I get that right? Yeah, so there we go. So 0 and 9999, 9.999. So math.floor will then floor that number, truncate it, so it will be between 0 and 9 at that point. So that would be index 0 to index 9, which would be an array that is 10 long. All right, so that's pretty good. So I like that line of code. So that's going to give me a random number between 0 and 10, or 0 and 9. So let's go ahead and let's start writing some code here. So I'm going to write function generate. All right. And this is just going to generate the technobabble. So we're going to be calling this later. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's go, we'll just say const word1 equals, I'm just going to paste this thing here, math, and what I'm interested in, and actually we'll call that w1. All right. And then I'm going to say, give me a number. All right, so this is going to say words1 and give me anything between index 0 and index 9 inclusive is what that's going to do. All right, so this isn't the full solution. All right. And yeah, we're going to be updating this as we go along. So we're going to say W2 and W3. All right, and words2, words3. All right, so that's not going to use the whole array. That's just going to use index 0 through 9. All right, and then we're just going to say return. All right, so we're going to return a, and there's a couple ways to do this. So we'll just say W1 plus a space plus W2 plus a space plus W3. All right. And then we can actually go test this guy. So this should be getting a random word out of the first 10 elements, okay? And then stringing it together and returning that value. So let's go ahead and try that. So I'm going to reload the page so I get the new JavaScript. And then generate, I'm going to call it dorsal command buffer replicator, command propulsion deflector, antimatter improbability polymer. Wow, so it works. So that was pretty cool. All right, so so we wrote our function. Yay! So let's go ahead and fix this to actually pull in everything. So to pull in everything, what I want to do is, rather than multiplying times 10, I want to go times the length of the array. So it's going to be words length, words1 dot length. So there's a length property. All right, and we just do that for each one of them, and then we will get all of the array, all of the elements of the array. Okay. So let's go ahead and try that, reload, and then generate. Seems to be working. Okay. All right, so good. We did the first. So we wrote some code. So let's go to our steps here. So we got random elements out of the 3 arrays. So we got that working. Yay. So the first thing, there's more than one way to do it. So we found a way to do it. Once you have this working, can you get rid of some duplicated code? Whoops. Ideally, there should be only one call to math.random, not 3 calls. So let's take a quick look here. And yeah, actually, I have a lot of duplicated code here, so that's not good. So let's go ahead and write a inner helper function. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and write it right here. I'll call it, function random element. All right, capital E there. Function random element. And we're going to be calling that from down here. So you could declare this, if you wanted out here, it doesn't matter. But I'm only going to be using it inside of the generate function. So I'm going to just make an inner function. And I'll go ahead and just copy this line. And then we'll modify it. So what we want to do is this helper function, we're going to pass in an array. All right. And then we're going to return a random element of that array. So I've got return. I'm just going to delete some code here. All right, so I'm going to return words1 math.floor math.random times words1.length. So rather than the words1 array, rather than hard coding that, what I want to say instead is whatever array gets passed in is what I'm going to be using. So this should return a random element of that array. So let's just go ahead and test that on the command line again, or the console, excuse me. So, I can't, it's an inner function. I can't, well, you know what? I guess we'll move it so we can test it. All right. So be it. Okay. That makes it easier to test. All right. So now we got random element up here. All right. So we'll go random element. And we'll say, give us a random element for words1. And navigational matter. Okay. So it looks like it's working. And then if we change to words2. All right, cool. All right, so that seems to work pretty good. All right, so what we can do instead here is we can change this to, well, there's a couple things we can do. So return, so we could keep our variables, or we could just ditch our variables. So we could just say random, so return random element words 1, right? And then just copy that, random element words 2, and then random element words 3, and then we can just ditch all this code here, and there we go. So we got a couple one-liners, so that should work. All right, so let's go ahead and try reload the page, and now we're going to be testing the generate function, and looks like it works. Okay, cool. All right, so we got rid of our duplicated code, so that's a good thing. All right, so let's move on to the next step, which is here. All right, so we are on we did step 1, get random elements out of 3 arrays, and then step 2 is, string 3 words together. Geez, we already did step 2. So we strung the 3 words together from the 3 arrays using string concatenation. That's an overloaded plus operator, so that worked well. Let's take a quick look at JavaScript ES6 template literals before we move on to the next part, which is updating the page, where we can actually see this. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and do this. So in our generate function, we're using string concatenation, so plus a space, plus another random element, plus a space. So let's use template literals instead. So what those look like is you're going to have a couple backticks. So rather than single or double quoted strings, you've got 2 backticks. The backticks are up by your escape key. So they're not single quotes, they're backticks. And then inside of the backticks, you put a $sign. So the first thing with backticks that is nice, actually, compared to double and single quoted strings, is you get multi-line strings. So that's a nice thing. So you can format your strings nicely. But more usefully, you can actually evaluate JavaScript expressions, so lines of code inside of the $, open curly brace, closing curly brace. So I'm just going to copy this line here, put it in there, and what you're going to see when I run this, let's go test generate, is it's going to execute that code and give us a random element from the first array. So you can see that it still works the same. So I'm getting back 1 element. So how do I get the other lines of the other arrays contents? So I just have to put in another expression here wrapped in the $, open curly brace, closing curly brace, and I'm going to look for words 2. All right. So if I do that, now I've got 2 words. All right. And then obviously for the last one, modify the code. Now I'm going to get 3 words. Okay. And so my spaces, I've put in a single space here, and those spaces are showing up between the words. All right. There we go. And if for some reason I want to put, I don't know, an exclamation mark or something at the end, I'll put it right before the backtick right there. All right. So there it is. Okay. So that's pretty handy. So that's string template literal. So that's just kind of an alternative. It's giving you the same output, probably a little less error prone. So let's go ahead and stick with that line of code, and we'll jump on to step 3, which is over here. So step 3, we want to update the ID output paragraph element so it displays the technobabble. All right. So we're going to use document query selector to select the element, and we're going to use the .inner HTML property of that element to display the text. So let's go ahead and write the code to do that. So we need to change things a little bit here. So let's get rid of this console.log. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be calling the generate function right when the app kind of starts up. So we're going to load in the arrays, then we're going to call generate. So in JavaScript, if you have function declarations, you can actually call those from anywhere in the script. So even though I haven't declared these functions yet, when I use the function keyword, they've been pre-parsed. So this is a legal thing to do, to call the function before it's actually declared. So we're going to call generate, and then generate, I've been returning the value for testing purposes, but I need to get rid of that. What I really want to do instead is just say const str. So const str equals this value, all right? And then I want to assign that value to the output paragraph. So let's go ahead and write the code to do that. So first thing I need to do is get a reference to that guy. So I'm going to use the query selector function, and query selector takes any valid CSS selector. So I could just say p for paragraph. All right, that would work. That would get a reference to the paragraph, and then modify its inner HTML. But in this case, I've only got one paragraph, so that would work. But in this case, I've already given it an ID, so I'm going to just go ahead and use that ID. So think of ID attributes. Only one element on the page is allowed to have a particular ID attribute. So they're basically like variables. They're unique. So I'm going to say, get me that reference to that guy, and then his .inner HTML, a property of that guy, is going to be equal to str. All right. So so that should work, hopefully, right? Except you might be screaming, I don't think it's going to work. There's going to be a problem. Let's go ahead and see what it is, though. Let's go ahead and reload the page, and bang! So it's going to actually fail, and it's going to give me a pretty helpful error message. Cannot set property inner HTML of null. So that's saying something's null. So what's null? Well, if I mouse over str, I'm going to say str is not null. It's fine. There's a value, ionizing access terminal. But what's null? Well, document query selector output is actually what is coming up null, though I really can't see that in the debugger here, but it is in fact null, but it's telling me that. So for some reason it's not detecting that. So what did I do wrong? Well, what I did wrong, and that is hinted in the notes. Let's go look at the notes. So if we jump ahead to step 5, important, your code must wait until the page loads before your JavaScript attempts to reference any elements on the page. Example, the paragraph and the button. All right. So the problem is this script tag is up here before the stuff down in the body tag. So this code is going to execute before the rest of the page loads. So we need to fix that. So there's actually a couple different ways to fix it. We could use event handlers, event listeners, but because this is a simple single page app, the simple solution is just I just cut that script tag out, and I'm going to put it here at the bottom of the body. Okay, so I'm going to put it down here at the bottom of the body. Let's give ourselves a little more room here. All right, so here's my HTML, and then here's my script tag. So yes, this is legal to do. All right, so now when this code runs, the page is already loaded, and I should be able to update the page elements with no problem. So let's go ahead and try that. We're just going to reload the page, and look at that, Impulse Display Platform. So we're good to go. All right, so that did in fact work. It's just moving the code to the bottom of the page. So in future videos, we'll look at how to use event listeners and other ways to architect our code, but we're just going to do it really simple today. All right, so let's move on to the next step, how to get the button to call the above code when it is clicked. And for that one, it's going to be pretty straightforward. We need to select the button, all right, with document query selector, and then we can use a event handler or an event listener. So basically we say, hey, here's this block of code, call it when there's a click event. So there's a couple ways to write this. So let's go ahead and do that. Well, we can do this in a couple different places. I guess we're calling generate when the page starts up. Let's go ahead and actually let's go ahead and write a new line of code here. So what we'll do here is we'll get a reference to the document.query selector. We'll say the button. What did I call the button? My button. So hash my button. All right, so it's going to get a reference to my button. And we're going to say on click. So we're going to use an event handler equals generate. All right. So what this is saying is this is an event handler. An event handler expects a reference to a function or a block of code that it wants to run. So here I'm just saying, hey, the generate function is what you're going to execute whenever you're clicked on. All right. Now, if I put on, you might be very tempted to put on parentheses. If you do that, then the generate function gets called immediately, and then what gets stored in onClick is the return value of the generate function, which is nothing. There is no return value. So you don't want the parentheses. You just want to have a pointer to the generate function. All right. So let's go ahead and reload the page and try that out. There we go. So it works good. All right. Now, if we had made the mistake of throwing the parentheses on there and reloading the page, we'd see that, oh, it works once at startup, but the event handler doesn't work. I can click as many times as I want. Basically, the event handler is pointing at null in this case because I have those parentheses there, because it's pointing at the return value of the generate function, which is nothing. All right. So it's a very, very, very common mistake. So don't make that mistake. So no parens. All right. So that looks pretty good. So let's move on to, we're pretty good. Let's move on to the next step. So in the instructions, let's see, we got 3 and 4 done. And then, yeah, so then it's just important, the onload thing. All right, so actually let's do a little bit of refactoring because all that's really left is the CSS. So let's do a little bit of refactoring on the code. So first of all, I did mention here you could use event target.add event listener in the click event. So let's just try that for giggles here. So an alternative to this line of code would be, let's use a event listener. So we could say add event listener, and then we would say the event we're interested, which is click, and then a function reference, which would be generate. So this should work exactly the same way, all right? So notice it's not on click like an event handler. The name of the event is click. And let's try that real quick here. So that still works the same way. Some other refactoring we could do. Let's go ahead and wrap this code in a function called init. All right. So we'll just go init and wrap the code and then call the code. Okay. So once again, we can just do it like that. That's completely legal. So if we look here, we've got our words 1, words 2, words 3. We've got the init function, or we call the init function, and then we have our functions all declared down here. Once again, JavaScript with the function keyword parses. They're going to parse everything in a script file first, and then they're going to start executing the code. So these have already been pre-parsed and preloaded. So this is legal to do this way. So let's make sure that still works. And it still works. Okay, so what's left is the styles. Let's go ahead and knock those off real quick here. So obviously it doesn't look too good. So what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to start off, and just to keep it really easy, for the body, we'll just say font-family. And, a good thing would be to probably import a font, maybe from Google Fonts or something like that. But I'm just going to use a built-in monospace font, to give it kind of a computery look. So let's see what that does. And there we go. So that didn't affect the button, but it did change the text there. So, but once again, you can embed a font, import a font if you want to. I'm going to change the size of the font. So for hash output, so for the our paragraph, we're going to say font size 200%. Whoops. So font dash size 200%. I can't type. All right, so that's better. Technobabble is definitely fitting in better, and we don't need the console anymore, so let's get rid of that. And if we head over to, let's go look in mobile land and see what we got here. So that is this guy, I think. Yeah, okay, so you can see there's the font. The text is bigger, although not very big. And the button, whoops, the button works. We don't want that zooming though. Okay. But yeah, it's definitely not sized right, so we need to fix that. We'll fix that here in a little bit. What else are we going to do? For my button, so for the button, we want to increase the size of the button. So we're just going to hard code the width and the height. So I think I did width 200 pixels, height. So I got a peek here in my cheat sheet. What did I do? 50 oh, I did points instead of pixels. Not a huge difference. Oh, I did pixels and points, probably for no good reason, but we'll just deal with it. Font size 15 points. Remember, points are actually an absolute fixed size. They're 1/72 of an inch. A pixel is relative to the size of the screen, so there are slight differences. All right, so let's see. That should have changed the button a little bit. Yeah, okay, now the button's bigger. And if we go over to iPhone, yeah, the button is bigger, so that's good. All right. So the desktop version looks pretty good. We got to work on the mobile version. So for the mobile version, I already Googled it. So I can copy paste. This is the Mozilla viewport meta tag screen. So we're going to use We're going to use the viewport meta tag. So what this is going to do is this really solves. I'll let you read it here. So if we don't use this viewport meta tag, what happens is these mobile screens assume the size of the screen is 980 pixels wide, and then it scales everything to fit in that 980 pixel window. All right. So with the viewport meta tag, it's actually going to look at the exact size of the screen and scale from there, the exact size of the mobile screen. So let's go ahead and add that here. So that's going to be here, viewport, name equals viewport, content equals width equals device width. So rather than being 980 pixels, it's going to assume the width of the screen is the actual width of the screen. And then initial scale is 1. And then I'm going to say no scaling, so user-scalable equals no. And it's saying it causes accessibility issues, but for our little application, we're not going to worry about it. So scalable equals no. So if we go check that out now on our desktop version, it doesn't change anything. What if we go to our simulator version? Look at that. So much better. All right. So that's looking better. Now you might notice that the text is not really wrapping. It's wrapping, if it's multi-line, it's sticking to the left. It doesn't look very good. So here it actually seems to work pretty good. All right. So that's the last thing we need to fix here is the text and the button is also left aligned. So everything's getting pushed over the left side of the page. So our meta tag fixed the size, but it's not. But there's an issue with the centering of the text. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do a media query. Okay, so we're actually going to do a media query, and we're going to say, hey, when the screen is smaller, so when it's 600 pixels or less wide, we want to actually center everything. So we'll center the button, we'll center the text, and then we're going to get a look more like this. Okay, so this is the done version, and then this is our current version. So we want to look more like this. So to do that for a media query, it's going to be at media, and I could copy this to be faster, but I'll type it out. Only screen. So the media type of this is the screen media type. Max dash width is going to be 600 pixels. So anything 600 pixels and smaller is going to get this rule. So it's open curly brace. And then inside of there, we can specify one or more CSS rules. So in this case, we're just going to say for the entire body, we're just going to say text-align center. All right. So that means on any devices 600 pixels or less in width, it's going to go ahead and just align the text center, or align everything center aligned. So there we go. So boom, boom, boom. All right. So that did what we wanted it to do. All right. So that worked pretty good. Yeah, so I think we're actually good at this point. Yep, looks good. So, hey, middle-aged guy, we'll see you on the next video. Peace out.